When you're dealing with the stress of losing the jobs, one of the phrases you're going to hear from friends and acquaintances and professionals is mindfulness, to use mindfulness to relieve the stress. Mike Popovici is a teacher of mindfulness. He is a proponent of it. Obviously, if he's teaching it, he's going to tell us what we need to know about mindfulness. First of all, Mike, thanks for joining us. And what is mindfulness?
Thank you, Craig, for having me. And mindfulness is, because we'll hear different definitions of it. It's essentially a technique and a tool so we can then be centered and clear-minded and at peace, focused on the task at hand, right? Where otherwise we'd be kind of stuck and confused, not maybe confused, but bothered by our worries, our anxieties, or the things that happen to us throughout the day. Mindfulness is the practice of being in the moment, in that present, and clear. There's different techniques for it. There's different ways of doing it. There's breath work. There's awareness. There's working with the senses. All of that, different means of getting to the same place of that centeredness.
So how does being in the moment and aware in the moment help somebody deal with the stress of job loss?
Well, job loss is one of the most stressful things we can go through, because now the money is not coming in, and we need that to be able to support ourselves and those that are in our lives. And so one of the things, the many thoughts going on in our heads when we don't have a job, when we've lost a job, is how am I going to get the money, the stresses, the thoughts, the what ifs. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with those all the time, and they have a tendency to take over. And they have a tendency to make us act from a place of brash thinking, maybe, not choosing to act and maybe speak a little sooner. All of those things might happen. And in mindfulness, it helps us to take a pause, to feel where we're at, to connect with ourselves and realize that those are simply thoughts. And we can actually take a breath and be what we want to be with right now. Focused and clear-minded and doing the thing that we need to do, which is, for somebody that's lost their job, finding the right job. And if you're in an interview, the mindfulness will help you stay centered and bring the best version of you forward with clear statements and clear explanations and a smile where people start to connect with you. The opposite of that would be the very stressed, emotional, sporadic, spasming sort of way that we might be when we are worried of maybe not succeeding. We're actually, while practicing mindfulness, you're able to look the person in the eye more calmly, really understand the question, and bring that forward.
Can you give me some examples of how you practice mindfulness?
Yes, absolutely. One of the first things we teach and we learn when we're taking on mindfulness is breathing. Understanding that the breath is the thing that switches us to a state of relaxation. The right kind of breath activates our awareness of our body, so we're not in our head getting confused or becoming stuck in the many, many thoughts, the myriad of thoughts that might happen. When we breathe, we're able to connect with the feeling of our body breathing, which helps us come into the physical moment. And the state of our physical body is not the same as the state of our head. In our mind, we have these thoughts kind of causing a soup and a mess. When we breathe, we can relax the body, which then allows us to relax the mind. So that's one way to do this, is to have correct breathing. Abdominal breath is a really powerful way to do that. I teach that and actually offer some videos on my website where people can sign up for them for free and start practicing that for themselves. So breath work is one of them. Another one is sensory tools, feeling your feet on the ground, feeling yourself, visualizing, sending roots into the ground. There's a feeling of groundedness. A lot of where helps in mindfulness is that feeling of groundedness, because the opposite of that is being in our head and stuck in that myriad of thoughts and that maelstrom happening in there, worried about the what ifs and the possibilities and the what happened before, right?
Go ahead.
No, it sounded like you wanted to say something, so I stopped. So those would be great places to start. And the more you practice, the better and easier it comes to you, of course, right? And the best time to practice is actually when you need it the most. There's the one challenge that people have is they say, I don't have time for this. I'm way too stressed out. When I have my job, I will then make time for practicing and learning something new. The inverse is almost always true, where when we have the need, we have to make the time for that 5 or 10 minutes. Because in those 5 or 10 minutes, when we practice them daily, it's actually going to help us be more productive and find better opportunities, because we can think with more clarity and more creativity. Okay. Stress causes our brain function. We all know this, right? When was the last time we wrote a test and our brain goes, it's like we forget everything, right? Stress causes that creative aspect of us to shrink, because our mind says, well, you know what? I'm in a state of stress. I don't need all this complex reasoning stuff. It takes way too much energy. So our mind starts to reduce the available energy. Our body, our system starts to reduce the available energy, right? When we practice mindfulness, we teach ourselves to undo that, which then reopens the aperture in our mind and allows us to access creativity again. How much more effective can we be when we're centered, calm, and creative? When we are in a state of having lost a job, this is the moment and the time to actually implement learning this. No other better time.
Because this is when you're going to put it into practice right away and see the results.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're going to see the results in your first session, in your first practice. You're going to feel better. And then you're going to realize, okay, if I fit this in once or twice in my day, I'm going to be a whole different person, right? And otherwise, it just becomes nice knowledge. When we learn something without actually doing anything about it or practicing it, it becomes knowledge that hey, it's like reading a cool article about something scientific maybe, right? It's like, great, hey, I learned something fantastic. I forget about it a month from now. Mm-hmm. Right? But when you need it, that's the time to make time for it.
Now, how did you come to mindfulness?
Well, interestingly enough, so I used to be a quality manager. I used to be an engineer. I had a team of 30 people reporting into me in an aerospace manufacturing facility. And I used to make fun of mindfulness. I was one of those guys that said, there's no time for this stuff. What is this stuff? Right? I don't need this. I have my logic. I have my skills. I have my abilities. This is useless. And it unfortunately for me, I had to wait until everything fell apart. I hit this massive wall in life where all my coping mechanisms stopped working for me. I had nothing left but the pain, the hurt, and the stresses that were residing, that was containing inside of myself without realizing it. And all my coping mechanisms gone, the joy of life, my ability to access the good stuff wasn't there anymore for me anymore. So I had no choice. And I started to look at things that were other than engineering related and other than logic related activities. And one step led me to the next, and mindfulness became the start of what I needed to undo all of that. Now, because mindfulness is almost a foundation for everything else that builds on top of it. Okay. And as I started practicing that, and I practiced it in different ways because there are other techniques as well. I teach Qigong as well, which is an ancient Chinese technique of working with your body's vitality, employing mindfulness, right? So if you find it hard to try to meditate, if you find it hard to work with breath, Qigong is actually a movement meditation that helps you learn mindfulness directly through your own body. I started practicing that, and it started relaxing me. It started to bring me to a state of like peace, more peace than I had before, and gave me the ability to lift my head above water so I can see and take a pause and say, oh, wow, okay, I have space. I can make informed decisions. And when that started happening, because before that, it was all I could do to keep the pieces of my life from flying apart, not just falling apart, from flying apart. I was so stressed out, and I was so angry, and I couldn't think straight. I would have conversations at work with people just in front of me, and I couldn't piece together the sentences they were saying. That's how bad it was. Until I learned mindfulness that helped me come out of my confused mindset at the time into my body and be present. And that was a start for me. And that was just the beginning. There was so much more after that. Because once I opened that box, I was like, I'm not stopping. Right. So yeah. So actually I can't hear you right now, Craig. Something must have
Because I think I muted myself by accident. Sorry. So when you want something, when something's working, you want more.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I couldn't stop. And it was one after the next, because now I started, it was, you opened up this thing to like, wow, this stuff exists in life. And that it was, started with modest mindfulness to get me to stop from tearing my life apart.
Now, obviously, I mean, you're saying it, it's made a huge change in your life. So
Mhm.
much so that it seems like it's a regular part of your life. You've even gone so far as teaching it. If people want to explore it, what's the best way for them to do that?
You know what? There's a lot of self-help. There's a lot of YouTube videos. A lot of people tend to start there, but what I would say is to reach out to somebody that actually can teach you how to access that yourself. There's something much more in depth and much more real and connective when you're working with somebody directly. So reach out to me, reach out to somebody that has the experience, and it won't take very long. It'll be very effective to get you to start your own mindfulness practice in a way that's going to support you directly. Right? Because when you look at the videos online and you read the self-help, it's great, but you don't really have that live support to help put it into useful or context that is optimally useful for you. There's always going to be this, I don't get it, but I'm doing it anyways. Whereas working with somebody, there's that, oh, I get it. There's
You need to be able to ask questions.
Absolutely.
Now, I'll put a link to your website below this interview so people can access your resources. You said you had some free videos there.
Yes.
And anything last thing you'd like to add about mindfulness that you think people should know?
You know what? Honestly, it's as easy as or as straightforward as when you eat, take your time and remember to chew and enjoy the flavor of your food. Just help yourself get back into the moment, and don't wait till later, because that's the one thing people make a mistake on. And the longer you wait, the longer it takes you to achieve what you want to achieve, because the more you spend time fighting what's already in your head. Get the tools, and you'll get there much faster.
Well, it's something that I'm looking into. All I can tell you from the being in the moment, I've had one experience with it. In 2018, my son had emergency brain surgery. He's fine now. But he was 5 weeks in sick kids hospital and 5 weeks in rehab. And he had the whole left section of his skull taken out. And I realized in the hospital that if I looked back, it was terrifying. And if I looked forward, I was anxious. And the only safe place for me throughout that was here right now. While everything is okay, I'm just going to stay here. And that made a huge difference. And for our family, that's made a difference throughout the pandemic. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it full mindfulness, but certainly the theories behind it have helped me personally.
Absolutely. And when I was at work and wanting to wanting to tear my life apart because I was so full of hurt and anger, working on being in the moment helped me make the right decisions and have compassion for those around me in the way that they deserved and in the way they would have wanted to, and allowed me to be effective and gave me the time I needed to work my way out of that mess while still having my job and having the life that I had around me not fall apart. So absolutely, the mindfulness was the thing that helped me and helped you when you're with your son. So with those two examples, there's just a few of infinite number of examples where this is so important.
And you mentioned the compassion for people around you. And I can tell you from that experience that I talked about, compassion and kindness is like a virus too. That spreads. So you would be, maybe not directly, maybe not intentionally, but when you carry that with you, it goes on to other people too.
100%. And people will also sense it when you are, not that you don't want to be compassionate, but if you're feeling a lot of stress, you're being less compassionate, there's actually less support that comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you don't want it or you don't deserve it, but people react to that energy.
Yeah.
If the mindfulness helps you be in the moment and have more compassion, you'll actually get more support.
Mike Popovici, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your expertise. There will be a link to your website below this if anybody wants to check it out. And really appreciate your time and your thoughts.
Craig, thank you so much. It's been an honor. And whoever's listening to this, it's an honor to have you listened to this. My love to you.